Imagine a prophecy so precise that it names the future conqueror of an empire nearly 200 years before he arrives. A prophecy that speaks of a leader who would not just rule but liberate. This is what we find in the book of Isaiah, where a figure named Cyrus is foretold to free the Jewish people from the mighty Babylonian Empire. In this video we're diving into the incredible story of how the Persian Empire, led by King Cyrus the Great, conquered Babylon and freed the Jewish people from captivity. And here's where it gets fascinating. According to the Bible, all of this was predicted long before it happened. Prophets like Isaiah even mentioned Cyrus by name nearly 200 years earlier, describing him as a liberator for the Jewish people held in Babylon. But why did Babylon fall? And how did Persia, of all places, become the tool for fulfilling these ancient prophecies? We'll explore these questions by looking at what made Babylon such a powerful city, how Persia rose to dominate, and the unique role it played in religious history. Along the way we'll also uncover how Babylon and Persia impacted the faith of the Jewish people, how their beliefs evolved during their time in captivity, and how the intervention of a foreign king, Cyrus, helped them return home. And beyond that, we'll look at what these events mean for faith, unity, and understanding in today's world. To understand the impact of Persia's conquest of Babylon, let's first take a look at these two ancient powers and how they came to be such dominant forces. Around 600 BC, Babylon was the pinnacle of civilization. It wasn't just any city, it was a massive metropolis with grand architecture, vibrant markets, and the famed Hanging Gardens, which many consider one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon became the most powerful city-state in Mesopotamia, known for its wealth, influence, and unmatched defenses. Its walls were thick, towering high above the city, making it seem almost impenetrable. People believed Babylon would stand forever. Meanwhile, to the east, Persia was beginning to rise. What started as a smaller kingdom rapidly grew into a powerful empire under the leadership of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus was a brilliant strategist, known not only for his military skill but for his respect toward the cultures and religions of the places he conquered. He wasn't just building an empire of lands, he was also building an empire of ideas, where tolerance and respect for different cultures were central principles. By 539 BC, Cyrus's Persian Empire was ready to challenge Babylon. Babylon had been powerful for decades, but its leaders were growing overconfident. People living under Babylonian rule, including the Jewish exiles, were hoping for a change, a new power that might bring freedom or, at the very least, a different approach to leadership. Little did they know that this new power, Persia, would soon become the answer to their hopes. With a unique plan and determination, Cyrus set his sights on conquering Babylon. And in the process, he would fulfill a prophecy that had been spoken long before he was even born. This background sets the stage for one of the most significant moments in ancient history, not only in terms of politics and power but also in terms of faith and prophecy. Persia was about to do what seemed impossible, bring down Babylon, a city that had dominated the region for years, and they would do it in a way that would leave its mark on history. With Babylon towering as a seemingly unconquerable city, how did Cyrus the Great achieve what no other ruler could? His approach was both bold and unexpected. He turned to the very landscape itself to breach Babylon's defenses. Babylon's strength lay not only in its walls but in its location. The Euphrates River ran through the center of the city, providing a natural barrier that added to its security. But Cyrus saw an opportunity here. Instead of attempting a costly siege or assault on the walls, he devised a plan to use Babylon's own river against it. Cyrus ordered his army to divert the flow of the Euphrates, lowering the water level that ran through the city. With the water reduced to a shallow stream, his troops could enter Babylon by walking along the riverbed, bypassing the high walls and avoiding a direct confrontation. This strategy was brilliant, requiring patience, coordination, and an understanding of Babylon's geography. And because the city was celebrating a festival that night, many Babylonians were off guard, distracted by the festivities. Without a single major battle, Cyrus and his army walked right into Babylon and took control. This victory was more than just a conquest, it was symbolic. For the Jewish people who had been exiled to Babylon for nearly 70 years, it was a sign that change was coming. The mighty Babylon, which had once taken them from their homeland and held them captive, had now fallen without a fight. This was the city that had destroyed the temple in Jerusalem, the center of Jewish worship and community. And now, Babylon itself was vulnerable, defeated by a foreign king who didn't even worship the same God as they did. For many, the Persian victory felt like the hand of divine intervention. Here was a foreign king who, without knowing it, was fulfilling a prophecy written in the Jewish scriptures years before. According to the prophet Isaiah, God had foretold the rise of a man named Cyrus who would free his people and help them return home. This prophecy had been recorded almost 200 years before Cyrus's birth, naming him specifically, a rarity in ancient prophecy. Cyrus's conquest wasn't just a military victory, it was also a moment that held deep religious meaning. To the Jews, Cyrus became an unlikely hero, a ruler from a distant land who respected their faith and who, according to their beliefs, was used by God to bring about their deliverance. Cyrus's decree soon followed, allowing the Jewish people to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple. This act earned him the title of the Lord's Anointed in the Bible, an honor typically reserved for Jewish kings. This conquest transformed Cyrus's reputation in the ancient world. Instead of the typical conqueror who imposed his beliefs, Cyrus is remembered for his policy of tolerance. He respected the customs and religions of those he ruled, a quality that would make him stand out among the rulers of his time. His actions brought peace, stability, and even hope to those who had once been oppressed under Babylonian rule. So, with a single daring maneuver, Cyrus changed the course of history. He brought down Babylon, freed the Jewish captives, and fulfilled prophecies that had long foretold this moment. This event was more than a victory for Persia. It was a profound shift in the fate of a people who had been waiting for deliverance. Before its fall, Babylon was much more than just a city. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and cultural achievement. Known for its massive walls, sprawling gardens, and incredible architecture, Babylon represented the height of ancient civilization and the pride of the Babylonian Empire. One of the city's most famous structures was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, which legend says were built by King Nebuchadnezzar as a gift for his wife, who missed the lush greenery of her homeland. Although historians still debate the exact location and design of these gardens, they were considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. With terraces filled with plants, trees, and flowing water, these gardens captured the imagination of people from all over the ancient world. But Babylon's greatness extended beyond its architectural marvels. Its walls were thick, towering high above the city and stretching for miles, offering unmatched protection from outside forces. To the people who lived there, Babylon felt impenetrable, a fortress that could withstand any attack. It was a city built to last, one that its rulers believed would stand forever as a testament to their power. Yet, Babylon wasn't just about impressive buildings. It was also a center of culture, knowledge, and religion. Its temples, especially the massive ziggurat known as Etemenanke, were dedicated to the worship of Marduk, the chief deity of Babylon. People came to Babylon to study, to trade, and to worship, making it one of the most important hubs of the ancient world. Its influence stretched far beyond its walls, as it controlled a vast empire and shaped the cultural, religious, and political landscape of the time. For the Jewish people who were taken captive and brought to Babylon, this city represented more than just their place of exile. It was a powerful, almost mythical place. An empire that seemed indestructible and a culture that was vastly different from their own. Living in Babylon meant adapting to new customs, languages, and ideas, which inevitably influenced the Jewish people's own culture and practices. Yet, despite Babylon's might and influence, it was brought down by Cyrus and the Persians. Its fall wasn't just the defeat of a city, it was the end of an era. Babylon, once the symbol of unstoppable power, became a testament to the idea that no empire is invincible. Its fall would mark the beginning of a new chapter for the Jewish people and set the stage for a return to their homeland. When Babylon conquered Jerusalem, it wasn't just a military victory, it was a turning point for the Jewish people. Forced from their homes, they were taken as captives to Babylon, beginning what's known as the Babylonian Exile. For nearly 70 years they lived in a foreign land, adapting to a new culture and language while holding on to their beliefs and traditions. Life in Babylon was challenging for the Jewish people. They were surrounded by a different religion, with Babylonian gods like Marduk worshipped in grand temples, and their customs were foreign. But despite these pressures, they found ways to maintain their identity. During this time, many Jewish religious practices became even more deeply rooted, with the need to preserve their culture and faith growing stronger in the face of this separation from their homeland. The Babylonian exile also brought significant changes to Jewish culture. The Aramaic language, spoken widely in Babylon, became a common language for the Jewish people, influencing their own language and even some of their religious texts. Some historians believe that the exile also led to the development of more structured religious practices, as synagogues began to serve as gathering places for worship and community in the absence of the temple in Jerusalem. In many ways, the exile deepened the Jewish people's faith and their understanding of God. They found hope in the writings of prophets like Jeremiah, who told them that the exile would not last forever. Jeremiah encouraged them to settle, build homes, and even pray for the peace of the city where they were held captive. But he also reminded them that God had promised to bring them back to their homeland one day. For the Jewish people, Babylon was both a place of hardship and a place of transformation. They learned to adapt while holding on to the core of their faith. They maintained their identity as God's chosen people even in a foreign land. And despite the power of Babylon, they clung to the belief that God would one day free them from captivity and allow them to return home. This resilience and hope were key. When Cyrus and the Persians eventually conquered Babylon, it wasn't just a political change, it was the fulfillment of a promise. The Jews were not only physically liberated, but they were also spiritually renewed, ready to rebuild their lives and their faith back in Jerusalem. When Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon, his actions marked a significant turning point for the Jewish people. Cyrus was unlike most rulers of his time. He was known for his respect toward the religions and cultures of the lands he governed. So, rather than imposing his own beliefs, he gave his new subjects freedom, an approach that was revolutionary in the ancient world. For the Jewish people in Babylon, this meant more than just a change in leadership. Cyrus issued a decree allowing them to return to their homeland in Jerusalem, an action that fulfilled a promise they had clung to for decades. According to Jewish scriptures, prophets like Isaiah had spoken about a ruler named Cyrus nearly 200 years before he was even born. Isaiah called Cyrus the Lord's anointed, saying that God would use him to free the Jewish people from captivity. For many, this was a miraculous fulfillment of prophecy. It seemed impossible that a foreign king, especially one who didn't share their beliefs, would act as a liberator for the Jewish people. But Cyrus's decree allowed them to return to Jerusalem, rebuild their city, and restore their temple, which had been destroyed by the Babylonians years earlier. This act of liberation was deeply meaningful, representing not only physical freedom but also a spiritual renewal. The return to Jerusalem was a challenging journey, yet it was one filled with hope and anticipation. The Jewish people could once again worship in their homeland, and they saw Cyrus as a tool that God had used to bring about this long-awaited freedom. For them, Cyrus's respect for their faith and his decision to let them return home were signs of divine intervention, proof that God had not forgotten his promises. Cyrus's role went beyond just allowing the Jewish people to return. He helped them restore their religious practices and community. In this way, he became an unlikely hero in Jewish history, remembered not as a conqueror, but as a liberator chosen by God himself. This act earned him a unique place in the Jewish faith, and he is still seen as a figure of justice and tolerance. In a time when empires were often brutal toward conquered people, Cyrus's actions were groundbreaking. His respect for different faiths and his role in the Jewish return to Jerusalem showed a different model of leadership, one that valued coexistence and peace. One of the most remarkable parts of this story is how the prophet Isaiah seemed to foresee Cyrus's role in freeing the Jewish people nearly 2 centuries before he arrived on the scene. Isaiah's prophecy, written while the Jewish people were still in their homeland, spoke of a coming leader named Cyrus who would act as a shepherd for God's people, guiding them back to their land. This prophecy is found in the book of Isaiah, where Cyrus is called the Lord's anointed. In this context, anointed was a significant term, typically reserved for kings and leaders chosen by God. What makes this so unique is that Cyrus was a Persian king, a foreigner with no knowledge of the Jewish God. Yet, according to Isaiah, God would use him to fulfill his promises to the Jewish people. In Isaiah 45, God speaks directly about Cyrus, saying, "I will go before you and level the mountains. I will break down gates of bronze and cut through bars of iron." The prophecy even outlines that Cyrus would subdue nations and open doors that no one could shut. When Cyrus conquered Babylon, his victory without a full battle seemed to align perfectly with these words, further strengthening the belief among the Jewish people that he was indeed chosen for this purpose. For the Jewish exiles in Babylon, this prophecy would have been a source of incredible hope. Imagine being captive in a foreign land, clinging to the words of a prophecy that names a specific king who would one day come to free you. When Cyrus rose to power and conquered Babylon, it must have felt surreal, like witnessing the words of their prophet come to life. Isaiah's prophecy about Cyrus was more than just a prediction. It became a reassurance that God was still in control, even in the darkest times. The Jewish people saw Cyrus not just as a political liberator, but as a fulfillment of God's promises, a reminder that they had not been abandoned. This prophecy strengthened their faith and gave them courage to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their lives. For generations, Isaiah's words about Cyrus have been a profound example of how God can use anyone, regardless of background or belief, to fulfill his plans. Cyrus's role shows that faith transcends boundaries, and that sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places. While Babylon and Persia were mighty empires, they were also places where the faith of the Jewish people was tested, shaped, and ultimately strengthened. Both cultures left a lasting impact on the Jewish community, influencing their traditions, language, and even their understanding of God. In Babylon, the Jewish people faced challenges unlike anything they had known before. Far from their homeland and their sacred temple, they had to find new ways to connect with their faith. Over time, Babylon became not just a place of exile, but a place of spiritual growth. Without the temple, synagogues and communal gatherings grew in importance, helping the Jewish people keep their identity and sense of purpose. Babylonian captivity taught them resilience and made them look inward to understand and maintain their covenant with God, even when they felt distant from Him. Then, with the rise of Persia and the decree of Cyrus, God's intervention became clear to them in a powerful way. Cyrus's respect for their faith and his decision to allow them to return to Jerusalem wasn't just a political move, it was seen as a divine act. To the Jewish people, Cyrus was God's tool, an unexpected ally from a foreign empire who would restore them to their land and let them rebuild their sacred temple. Persia represented a new chapter, one where their faith and traditions could be revived and celebrated back in their homeland. Yet even as they returned, the influence of both Babylon and Persia remained. The Aramaic language, widely spoken in Babylon, became common among Jewish people and even influenced the writing of parts of the Bible. Persian customs and ideas also left their mark, giving the Jewish people a broader perspective and helping them understand that God's plans could work through any nation, even those that seemed foreign or distant from their own beliefs. For the Jewish people, the time in Babylon and Persia was a period of both trial and divine intervention. It showed them that God was with them in exile and used even foreign kings like Cyrus to fulfill His promises. These experiences deepened their faith, teaching them that their identity as God's people wasn't limited to a single land or temple. Instead, they carried it with them, sustained by their covenant and the knowledge that God's presence could be felt anywhere, even in the heart of foreign empires. Beyond the liberation of the Jewish people, Persia holds a broader significance in the Bible and religious history. Throughout Scripture, Persia is often seen as a land of wisdom and mystery, even appearing in the New Testament centuries after the time of Cyrus. In the story of Jesus' birth, the Magi, or wise men, are believed to have come from the region of Persia, bringing gifts to honor the newborn king. This connection highlights Persia as a place associated with knowledge, spirituality, and reverence. Persia's impact on the Jewish people, combined with the respect Cyrus showed for their beliefs, gives Persia a unique role in biblical narratives. Unlike other empires that oppressed or resisted God's people, Persia stands out as a land through which God's purposes were fulfilled. This legacy reminds readers that God's influence transcends borders, and that faith and wisdom can come from unexpected places. Persia's role is a powerful example of how different cultures and beliefs can intersect in meaningful ways. For many, the Persian Empire represents not only a political force but also a reminder of the strength of faith, unity, and respect between diverse peoples. The story of Persia's conquest of Babylon is more than just an ancient tale. It's a reminder of how history, faith, and prophecy can come together in surprising ways. From Cyrus the Great's unexpected role as a liberator to the profound changes the Jewish people experienced in Babylon and Persia, this story shows how faith can survive, even thrive, under the most challenging circumstances. The fall of Babylon and the rise of Persia marked a turning point that fulfilled promises and changed the course of history. For the Jewish people, it was proof that God could work through anyone, even a foreign king, to bring about redemption. And for believers today, it's a reminder that faith and resilience can see us through the darkest of times. In reflecting on these events, we see how cultures and empires come and go, but principles like faith, hope, and unity remain timeless. Cyrus's actions demonstrate the power of respect and compassion across boundaries, a legacy that still speaks to us today. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Let's keep these conversations going and find inspiration from the past to build a more understanding future.